right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Redefine Tomorrow. Thank you to SCB 10X for the invitation. And very excited today to talk about Arbitrum and L2. Just as a quick intro, nice to meet you. My name is Shikai, and I'm from LongHash Ventures. We are an investor and accelerator based out of Singapore as well as China. And of course, joining us, we have Steven, the co-founder of Offchain Labs, building Arbitrum. So nice to see you again, Steven.
Likewise, great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, if I may just start off with a quick, news highlight about Reddit. I was so excited to see the news about them using Arbitrum for scaling their tokens, right? Like the decentralized social media narrative, I think is really starting to take off.
Yeah, it's super exciting news for us, and it's a long time coming. We were working with their team for several months now, and obviously have been looking forward to today since we submitted our proposal to the bake-off last year, just about a year ago. So really excited to get to this point. I think we're still in early days and looking forward to continuing to work with their team and for a long time to come to scale Ethereum and really bring the masses to Ethereum. I think this is the first traditional web company that's really doing something very large in Ethereum, or at least the first one that I can think of offhand. And it's really exciting for us to be a part of that. And this is definitely a very big day for us.
Indeed. Yes, we're going to dive a lot more into that as well. Of course, like today has been a highlight, especially with that news, but it hasn't always been that kind of rosy, right? It has been a long journey to get to here. And I understand that Arbitrum and yourself came from very academic roots and then just built all the way here. So would you like to kick it off with sharing how it all started and how your journey in crypto started?
Yeah, definitely. So my journey in crypto started definitely was academic roots. That's correct. I was as a PhD student. Right when I got to Princeton, my advisor, Arvind Narayanan, sort of introduced me to Bitcoin at the time, and I was fascinated by it, and over time got into smart contracts, Ethereum, as Ethereum developed over time, and so that's my personal story of how I was first introduced, and really during the course of my PhD, got more and more involved and interested in the space. But Arbitrum has a similarly early story. So that's my co-founder, Ed. Really was the first one to think of to envision what an early stage of what Arbitrum is today. And Ed, if you look back, Ed's been thinking about scaling blockchains and scaling smart contracts, for years and years, even before Ethereum was live. Because it was always clear to us, clear to Ed, I should say, that one of two things will happen: either this technology takes off and it needs to scale, or the technology goes away. And we didn't think that the technology was going away. So we were pretty sure that this was going to, keep on the usage and demand, and the community interest was going to keep on increasing. And then, at that point, it was obvious to us that we needed to scale and start thinking about scale early, because scaling wasn't a problem that it's become dire in the past, say, 6 months, 1 year. But it was kind of clear that was coming for a long time. So we've been thinking about these problems for a very long time. And so Ed was the earliest one of us involved in Arbitrum. And then Ed went off to the White House. He was a senior advisor to President Obama and deputy CTO of the White House. And when he came back in 2017, that's when Harry, my other co-founder, and myself, we sort of went into Ed's office and said, "Hey, Ed, that Arbitrum thing you were working on a few years back, I think it's time we pick that up." And we first picked it up in an academic context and published a paper on it. And in 2018, we spun out the company, and it was clear to us that we wanted to actually build something and build something. Ethereum was obviously already live, and at that point, so from the earliest days of the company, we were on Ethereum layer 2. That was clear to us. And we've been building for years. And I guess today is a nice culmination of that, where we see, the actually taking these years of work, academic work, company work, and actually seeing, a very large internet player come and build with us. And it's really a validation for everything we've been doing. And again, though, I think this is early on. I think we're looking forward to, many more good years of scaling together and bringing more and more users onto Ethereum and into the world of decentralization.
Indeed. If I may just zoom in a little bit on your journey there, because I think there are a lot of academics and students and PhDs, researchers who would like to also go through a similar journey, right? Of like actually building something impactful and seeing it come to fruition. And often it is kind of a struggle, right? Because for developers, they've been building applications and entrepreneurs, right? For like financial people, like maybe they come into DeFi like quite naturally. But for an academic, right, how did you actually make that transition and actually make the decision to start the company and sustain it for the number of years before we see the traction we have today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really depends. And there are sort of different types of researchers. My personal flavor has always been rather than starting from the solution, starting from the problem and taking something which I think is going to be a real world problem, because those are the things that I can get most motivated about, and trying to build a solution for that. And for example, some of my PhD work was in digital asset custody. I did work in threshold ECDSA, and there are a bunch of companies that are built around building and using that technology now, like Fireblocks and others. And similarly with Arbitrum and scaling, we sort of, as an academic, you have the freedom to take a big bet problem, a problem where you don't need to produce a solution right away, and you have your time to sort of think about it and build a solution. And this was clear to us that it was a years away to build a solution to this problem, and something that we thought was going to be very, very needed. And that motivated us. And in the academic context, that's all you need. If you have a problem you're excited about, you can build and write a paper about it, and you don't need to justify that. And we've been fortunate to have some really great backers in the company days who really believed in our vision and were willing to support us through the years of building it took to get here. But fundamentally, I would tell any academic looking at this, it's really about looking to real world problems and actually talking to people, talking to engineers and entrepreneurs, and saying, what are your problems? What are the problems that are too hard for you to solve today? And spending time looking at those, rather than starting from some clever solution and then trying to find the real world application, which is also a fine approach to academic work, but it often won't have the same immediate use case than starting from the use case and building backwards.
Indeed. It's interesting how like the same kind of piece of recommendation, it's universal throughout like all of the investors and projects, and we love to tell our founders the same thing. But also from the academic angle, interesting to hear that it is the same approach. So even though we can say that coming from academic roots or having an academic culture does not mean that we just kind of like lock ourselves in the study and research about what's new to build, right? Like listening to the ground and building something useful that people want. So
absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So let's take a snapshot then, coming in on to today, right? We hear about Reddit. What else would you like to share about the Arbitrum ecosystem? Just some high-level facts on where we are today.
Yeah, so we're at a very exciting time for us. So Reddit's obviously super exciting for us and very fresh news. But there are also hundreds of other projects that we're working with on the context of Arbitrum 1 that are building on Arbitrum 1. So we're right now in a developer mainnet stage of Arbitrum 1, and we're basically readying this ecosystem. And we have dozens of projects, or many projects, that are already deployed, hundreds that are in the process of deploying, including some of the biggest infrastructure providers and dApps on Ethereum. So this is also super exciting for us, and it's a really interesting and hard coordination problem where basically our view is to, and there are different views on how to launch an ecosystem, but our view is to try to get the full ecosystem up and ready. So when users come on day one, they'll know exactly what, everything that they want will be there and be ready for them. Their assets will be bridged. They'll have lending, they'll have exchanges, they'll have options, they'll have derivatives. They'll really have everything on the platform, and we're well on the way to this. And I think the main thing that we realized along the way, something that, for example, in our early academic days wasn't the case, but has really been a focus in the company, is EVM compatibility, and really making sure that we are fully compatible with the tool chain that people already know, that people already wrote code in, that apps are already written in. So all the existing code and all the existing developer knowledge, we are super compatible there, and make it really as easy as possible for developers to build on us. And we think that's a big reason of why we have so many teams we're working with, because we rather than having them change their code and change their paradigms to meet something new for L2, we've designed the L2 in a way that we did the heavy lifting in a way that makes everything else easier for people building on us. So I think that's, in terms of what our focus is, it's really Arbitrum 1, and also again supporting supporting others and bringing masses to Ethereum, like Reddit. We really believe in scaling Ethereum, and on the one hand, tap into the Ethereum stack and make it easy for projects to build, and also look for new opportunities like Reddit of how to bring masses and masses of users and millions of users, new users to Ethereum and experience the ecosystem that we love.
A recurring theme that you mentioned a couple of times there is around how easy it is to deploy on Arbitrum, right? And would you like to just elaborate a bit about that? And also, did that come from the feedback and approach of like talking to developers? What were some of the major things that they were looking out for and they found in Arbitrum?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, where we are today really came from talking to developers. And again, if you look at in the academic context, we were blockchain agnostic. We didn't even, we said it doesn't matter. In an academic world, that's a plus. It's like, oh, you can fit onto anything. But when you sort of get into the company phase, you have to know what you're building. And so initially, it was always clear to us we're building on Ethereum. We always wanted to be part and felt a part of the Ethereum community, and are big believers in Ethereum, and still are. But compatibility was something which we learned along the way. Maybe about a year and a half ago, we put out our initial alpha of our software, and it was almost compatible, but it had like a custom compiler, and it had certain, it was maybe 90% compatible with Ethereum. And something we learned from speaking with developers, that the difference between being 90% compatible and 100% compatible is like super massive, right? It's the difference between having to think about it and re-architect your code and saying, oh, what doesn't work, what's different, maybe having to repeat your security audits, and the difference between having to do absolutely nothing. So I think that's something we learned along the way. There are many things we learned along the way, and it's always from feedback from users and developers, and them trying our system and saying, hey, I wish you can have this. And so one thing we do, we launched our testnet in October, so many months ago. And we've had the fortune of having many teams build on that. And along the way, we launched 6 test nets and constantly iterating. And, other than, of course, there's performance and stability changes that we made along the way. But one of the biggest points of feedback and changes were driven by the community themselves, and telling us, hey, we need this. Hey, we think that this call should have this semantic or something like that. And really, we learned from what people want. Because ultimately, our goal is to provide a scaling solution that people want. And how better than to actually hear from the developers and incorporate their feedback. So I think that's everything we've done today is really a culmination of learning, and we're still learning, and there will still be feature requests and changes. And one of the things we have is the ability to iterate rather quickly, and something which we'll continue to do to make sure we build the product that people really want and will use.
If I may pick up on something you just said that's really interesting around like the 90% compatibility versus the 100% compatibility, right? And this in a way, I guess, can be framed as, Arbitrum's differentiator in the sense that like really nothing needs to change, right? Like the entire code base can be the same, and even experience, I think you mentioned before, on the infrastructure is completely the same. They can rely on the same tools and infrastructure that they were relying on layer 1 as well.
Yeah, so everything that's exactly right. Everything that the only thing basically that ever comes up in our conversations that needs to change is essentially gas prices, because we do different gas encoding. So if you have hard coded gas prices, you'll need to change those. But basically, the entire code can change. Can stay with essentially no changes. And any infrastructure that that relies on the API. That doesn't need to go into the internal guts. We'll work just out of the box, and we found that with like Truffle and Hardhat, and as well as we're fortunate to be supported by some of the largest infrastructure providers in Ethereum, such as Consensus, Infura, Alchemy, Chainlink, the Graph, you name it, Etherscan. And you would have the ability of their ability to integrate with us is super, super simple because we provide the same API as Ethereum, the same surface as Ethereum. So integrating with us is important. And that's a big part of the developer experience, right? Because everything I said before, which is like, we give you the same code, you could use your same code. That's part of the developer experience. But the other part is also having your familiar infrastructure, right? It's not just blockchain developers don't just push code. They also have dependencies, infrastructure dependencies, app dependencies. So it's really a part, part of it is what we can do. We can get the developer experience and the code to be compatible, fully compatible, and that's what we did. But it's also enabling the Ethereum infrastructure providers and working with them to deploy and support us as well. And that's part of this hard process of coordinating the migration of an ecosystem, and something which we're very deep into right now, but fortunate to work with excellent partners and give them the tools that they need to integrate seamlessly and not have to make large scale changes to their setup or to their code.
Awesome. Yes, this indeed very exciting. And now to move on to a second part, right? So with all these like easy onboarding and these apps, hundreds of them already kind of like wanting to deploy on Arbitrum, then we come to a point where we talk about some network effects that potentially can form, right? Or is that kind of a misnomer because there are so many layer 2s, and the idea is that there's some sort of competition, but everybody's kind of in the end scaling Ethereum. But at the same time, you want to accumulate some sort of network effects for Arbitrum specifically, right? Would you like to just elaborate on what kind of ecosystem or network effects that the Arbitrum actually builds and how that relates back to the Ethereum ecosystem or other layer 2s?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the biggest network effect is really Ethereum. The Ethereum is, we're believers in Ethereum. We're part of the Ethereum community. Every Arbitrum transaction has a counterpart in Ethereum. They're batched, but every Arbitrum transaction puts data on Ethereum. And so, the biggest network effect that we're fortunate to be a part of is really Ethereum. And we think that that's the strongest network effect there. There's so many believers in Ethereum, so many projects that just will only launch on an Ethereum layer 2, Ethereum layer 2. So that's, of course, the biggest network effect that we're very much a part of. But in terms of course, even when you look at a specific rollup like Arbitrum on Ethereum, there are network effects there as well. So, all of these infrastructure providers that I just mentioned, that enables, there are so many projects that rely on those. There are projects that rely on, if you look at, different projects, they're basically dependency graphs, right? There are certain projects that they can't build without, say, Chainlink support, or they can't build without, say, Gnosis Safe, or they can't build without, they can't build without Uniswap, right? So there's so many projects that need, and these are just to name a few, not to, there are lots of excellent projects we're working with, so not to be exclusive at all, but the idea is that the dependency graphs are complex, and you can view it as a pyramid. There are some on the bottom, that's like the core infrastructure, and then like the apps like Uniswap are towards the bottom. Then there are apps on top that just need so many pieces, and the more pieces you get, the more apps you unlock, right? So that's something which we found, of course, and then building that network and having that network is super important, because if you're an app that has dependencies and those dependencies are already live in Arbitrum or Arbitrum One, that becomes very, very compelling and easy for you to build on. So that was definitely, the network effects are very important there, and which is one of the reasons why we're doing this coordination problem of actually moving people onto Arbitrum One, and it takes time, of course. We launched our developer mainnet on May 28th, and we've been fascinated by been super happy with the pace of all these projects are building. But we're building the pyramid, and you have to start from the bottom layer. So first, we needed to let the infrastructure in and do their thing, and then apps that just have infrastructure dependencies, and then we build the pyramid from there. And we're quite far along there, but definitely, if you tried building the network any other way, it just wouldn't work, right? You can't start at the top, because then these apps can't launch because they require pieces that aren't there. So definitely, I think there's very, very strong network effects, both Ethereum's network effect as well as Arbitrum's network effect there. And I think it will be very compelling for projects to come and build there and stay there over time as well.
Indeed. Of course, anytime we talk about network effects, by definition, they're somewhat exclusionary as well, right? So this means that, fundamentally, there's some level of fragmentation still between the layer 2s, and, there are bridges that are required, like with other side chains or EVM compatible chains as well, right? And that's something that I guess we're all trying to solve. And to a certain extent, right? Like for Arbitrum as well, we'll need a lot of bridging for liquidity and withdrawals and so on. Would you like to just elaborate a bit about how that can be addressed, or is this kind of like we want it to be a problem so that it becomes a moat for Arbitrum?
Yeah, no, I think that it is important. Of course, network effects do imply this, and bridging is a super important part of the ecosystem now. I think a part that's going to become more advanced over time. And even even if you just focus on Arbitrum and take the Reddit example for today, right? Reddit is doing another chain, another Arbitrum chain. So there will still need to be bridging there. And we view this. I think in the long run. What you'll find is synergistic chains. You might have like a chain devoted to scaling communities. You might have an NFT chain. You might have a DeFi chain. Right now we're at the point where we can probably put this all in one rollup, and that will last us for some time. But over time, if the demand and and the influx of new users and new developers to Ethereum comes, we'll need multiple rollups, even if there are multiple Arbitrum chains, like we're seeing today, the first example of that. And so fundamentally, we want good bridging, and we need good bridging. And we're fortunate to work with some really, really excellent projects here, and there are lots of them. And we as with everything we do, we're agnostic and really try to work with everyone. And I think though today, there's going to be a lot of, I mentioned, new developments and focus on this. And today, a lot of the bridging is really about transferring assets, and they focus on transferring assets quickly. So getting over any like withdrawal delays that systems like optimistic rollups have, and also cheaply, right? So doing things more cheaply than using the native bridges. So this is like the focus of bridging today. But I think over time, the focus will also turn to not only how do we do bridging of assets, how do we do things like actual bridging, like protocols and like shared liquidity. And back to your initial question, for academics listening today, this is something we don't know how to do, but it's critically important. And I think it's critically important to the future of this space. So this is one of those big bet problems that is like, well, if you solve this and figure out a good way, and there's some great projects that are already, looking into this and solving this, but we're in very, very early days. But I think bridging is going to become more important, and I think more advanced over time, and we definitely welcome that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, I think we can already see a lot of that happening today. And as I understand, of course, with the setup of Arbitrum, like there is a need for bridging and like these like fast bridges as well, like for fast withdrawals. So certainly that will be very, very much needed. But how should projects think about it, right? Because you mentioned like a potential future where every application is going to have its own chain. To a certain extent, we see that happening already. Like Axie has its own chain. Like you said, Reddit's going to have its own implementation. We have things like Polkadot and Cosmos coming up, and all of them are their own chains in a way. So at this current point in time, like DeFi applications, essentially they are going to have implementations on almost like every single layer 2, it seems like. Is that basically a patchwork interim solution? And we're going to move towards, like, for example, Compound having its own chain, Uniswap having its own chain, and then in the end, it's all just bridges. In that case, like, where do rollups play?
Yeah. So to clarify, I didn't mean to suggest that every application will have its own chain. I think the long-term future that I think will happen is different verticals will have their own chain. So you'll have DeFi chain, you'll have, Uniswap and Aave will be on the same chain, but they'll probably, at some point come to, they'll consolidate. They won't, they think the launching on every chain is more of a medium-term solution, but I think there will be consolidation over time. But I think you'll have an NFT chain, and I think you'll have chains for other verticals that we don't even imagine today. I can't guess what the next thing will be, but maybe gaming, for example, is something we see up and coming. You'll have a gaming chain, and I think the idea here is there's a balance between scalability, right? So if everything was on its own chain, and state bloat, right? So you don't if everything was on its own chain, the cost of validating any one of these would be low, and we'd also be able to do a lot more in parallel. But on the other end of the spectrum is composability, right? The amazing, the magic of DeFi is really the composability, that you can do this transaction that calls out to a bunch of different DeFi protocols and borrows and exchanges all atomically in one transaction. And I don't think that's going away. I think that that's super important. So I think having one chain is going, we will have, I don't think we'll get to a world where every app has its own chain. I think we'll see big ecosystems develop on one chain, and that's here to stay. But I do think we'll see projects almost self-organizing over time in, hey, do I need to compose with these projects, or am I really, comfortable being in a silo with those projects? And I think we'll see these sort of communities almost like self-sharding pop up over time. That's at least my medium-term to long-term vision. Again, right now, from our perspective, we're onboarding everyone onto Arbitrum 1 for the most part, DeFi, NFT, and we think that will be enough for a very long time. But I do think that over time, we will see different chains pop up over synergistic who do you want to compose with, the synergistic relationships. And I think the composability within a chain will probably always be the best and always be the easiest and better than any bridge we have. But I think as bridges get better and better, we can really potentially bridge that gap to no pun intended to sort of have your cake and eat it, have low state flow and multiple chains and parallelism, and also have the ability to some extent share liquidity in between these. But I think I don't think that the idea of having multiple projects composed on one chain is going away really ever. I think that's a critical part of what we're doing here.
Indeed. So in that future that you are envisioning or projecting, predicting, where would Arbitrum play, right? And how would you position Arbitrum today to then, capture that kind of future?
Yeah, so I think Arbitrum is a strong part of that future. I think rollups are a strong part of that future. And I think, again, I'm a big believer in the Ethereum ecosystem, and I think rollups are the end game for the Ethereum ecosystem. And that's where we end up. And I think we'll probably end up in a place where we have several rollups. And, for all I know, they could all be Arbitrum rollups, right? We have the Arbitrum 1 chain, maybe that's, which has, strong DeFi presence today. Maybe the Arbitrum Reddit chain is really optimized for scaling communities. And maybe you have an Arbitrum gaming and NFT chain, and we have great respect for others in the space as well. That's not to suggest there won't, maybe there will be others as well. But I'm just sort of giving the view of, I think there will be a small number of rollups, relatively small number of rollups are organized around verticals. And I think over time, rollups will get better as well, and we'll make more advancements there in increasing scaling, increasing capacity there, and less state bloat over time as well. But I think, we're far away from it's going to be a process over time to get there. But I think in the short to medium term, I think just getting everyone on board a rollup is going to be great. Getting people onto Arbitrum 1 and building these synergistic communities, and then figuring out over time, what comes next, how we scale along different verticals. If verticals pop up, they don't need to compose with DeFi. And a lot of sort of NFT projects have this today. And that's why there are solutions that are application specific for NFTs, like Starkware has a bunch of these, and they really work well for NFTs, but they really highlight the point that there are certain projects that don't need to be composing with other projects so closely. And, that's fine. And we should support that. And I think we will support that. And to take Reddit again as an example, to wrap things up where we began them, they made the decision that, for what they're doing, they think that launching another chain makes sense. They don't need to compose with every app on Arbitrum 1. And I think that's for their application and for the applications that they envision launching alongside them on their chain is really, really powerful, and something which will develop more over time as different industries and different verticals emerge and synergistic relationships in these industries become clear.
Awesome. We are just running out of time. If I just can wrap up with one piece of, advice or insight, surprising fact that you'd like to share with everyone here, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. I think, I guess the thing I'll share is that, working in an academic context is very different. You sit down with a piece of paper and you can solve all the problems. Working in you actually take that into the world and into try to build things for people. You really can't do everything alone. So, as important as what we're doing is, it's really, really a community project, and we need the help of, it's not us alone. It's not our team alone can't do this. We need the help of really everyone. So everyone, that's other developers, other projects, users, community members, giving feedback, telling us what they want. And I think this is really, it's not about Arbitrum. It's really about Ethereum. And Ethereum is a massive community, and it's really bigger than one project or one person or really anything. And so I would encourage everyone to really please reach out, work with us. Hey, join our team if you're looking. But really, this is really a community project, and something which we really want to solve problems for everyone. And the only way that we can do that is aligning and doing that together.
Indeed. So call to action to everyone to come and join us, and also check out Arbitrum and all the layer 2s Thank you again so much, Steven, for joining us, and thank you, SCB, for organizing Redefine Tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed today's session. See you.
See you. Thanks for having me.